Us have faced storms during the course of our marriage. But what if your biggest storm was your wedding day itself? That happened to my husband Jim and me. No, we didn't have a family fight. We faced a literal storm, a winter blizzard. Well, you might say we should have known better when we picked February 19th, 1972 for a New England wedding. My dad, a Baptist pastor, was planning to retire in the spring, and my parents were packing up to return to Canada. Because both of us were keepers, we naturally picked our school vacation. Earlier in the week of our wedding, I checked the weather forecast, and it was supposed to be a nice, seasonable day on Saturday the 19th. On Friday, it was sunny and beautiful. All but one person in my wedding party arrived for the rehearsal, followed by a casual dinner at my parents' house. Everything went well, and there was no talk about snow. After dinner, one of my bridesmaids, my friend Joyce, drove back with me to my apartment in New Britain, Connecticut, about a half hour away. We looked outside before we went to bed, and the sky was clear, filled with sparkling stars. Well, what a difference a day makes. On Saturday morning, I woke up to a howling wind and the sight of falling snow. I ran to the window and was horrified at the sight. There was about a foot of snow, and it was still coming down. I turned on the radio and heard the announcer explain, "A surprise snowstorm arrived during the night, and it looks like it will snow most of the day." Then I heard a long list of canceled activities. Pretty much hysterical at this point, I quickly called my mom and I cried, "We have to postpone the wedding. Nobody is going to come." My mom replied that we couldn't postpone the wedding at this late hour. She reminded me that my wedding party and the rest of the family were already there. Anyway, the service wasn't until 2 p.m. and the road should be plowed by then. My mother's reasonable explanations did not calm me down. My dreams of 100 people to share our wedding day were shattered. I doubted if we could even make it to the church in Meriden. That was about 30 miles away. Joyce and I had planned to drive down to my parents' house, get dressed there, and then go to the church. I told Joyce that I couldn't drive in this blizzard. "Well, how are we going to get there?" she asked. "I'll call Jim. He lives nearby. He'll drive in this weather." "But you're not supposed to see him before the wedding." "Well, it wouldn't be the first unplanned event of the day," I explained. So Jim drove to the bottom of my hill and attempted to make it to the top, where my apartment was located. But his car skidded back down. So he left his car and walked up the hilltop to meet us. Then the three of us slid down the hill, with Jim carrying my wedding gown in the blinding snow. When we reached Jim's car, we slid down a few side streets until we got to the main highway, the Berlin Turnpike. We were dismayed to see that even this main road was hardly plowed. "We're not even going to make our own wedding," I cried. Jim calmly told me not to worry. Since we were the main act, the wedding would not go on without us. Suddenly, a snowplow pulled in front of us, and like an answer to our prayers, it started making a nice wide path in the snow. What was even more miraculous was that the plow stayed in front of us all the way to Meriden. When we got to the church, we saw that the sidewalk, stairs, driveway, and the parking lot were all filled with snow. None had been plowed yet. "I guess I better shovel a bit," said Jim, as he took the shovel out of its trunk. Jim was still shoveling as some of the guests arrived. He drove one lady's car down the icy driveway to the parking lot. Later, when that lady saw him dressed up as a groom, she exclaimed in surprise, "You're the groom? I thought you were the custodian." Before the service, I got dressed and then gathered in the church parlor with my mom and my attendants. I imagine that my group of attendants in the parlor was probably larger than the group of hearty souls waiting in the church. In fact, I consoled myself that even though hardly anyone would be there, at least we would still have a ceremony and get married. However, just before we walked down the aisle, my sister Crystal peeked out into the congregation. Jerry, there are lots of people there, probably 70 or even 80. Of course, I responded in disbelief. But when I started walking down the aisle with my dad, there they were. Most of the people that we had invited had risked their lives to attend our wedding. Many came from our former residence in Mystic, about 70 miles away. I had an overwhelming feeling of gratitude and love for these friends and relatives. Most dads will walk their daughters down the aisle, but rarely do they turn around and perform the ceremony. My dad, as the pastor, did it, and he played both roles very well. Our reception, thankfully, took place in the church hall. Everyone was joyful and seemed happy to be there. But the best part was when we noticed outside that the snow had stopped. Even better, the sun came out, and the bright sunshine and freshly fallen snow made a beautiful scene. I finally relaxed, knowing that our guests were enjoying themselves and that they would have a much easier and safer drive home. So our storm had passed. One of our friends said as she was leaving the reception, well, if that's the biggest storm you face, you'll have a long and healthy marriage. Almost 50 years later, I think she was right.